All right, so the 2023 NFL trade deadline is coming up on October 31st, and coming up on today's San Francisco 49ers Report, some top trade targets for the Niners. How we're going to go about this show here today, we're going to take a look at some of the sellers across the NFL who could put some marquee players on the trading block, and also what trade targets make sense specifically for the San Francisco 49ers. And I already know we just started the show. And some people are going to venture down into the comment section and they're going to say, 2 words, salary cap. For those of you saying that San Francisco can't make a move, they don't have any money, false. We have the receipts. We have the information. The Niners, number 1 in the NFL in salary cap space with more than $40 million. So they can add to what is already a very deep and loaded roster. And remember, the report that we talked about last week on the show that got 120,000 views was this report from Dan Graziano of ESPN. He said, don't rule out the possibility of the 49ers, as tremendous as they already look, adding a player if they think it can make a difference. The Niners have the biggest of goals for this season. They were aggressive last year when running back Christian McCaffrey became available. Remember the Rams adding Von Miller at the deadline a couple of years ago. If an opportunity for an impact guy like that comes along at the right cost, do not sleep on the idea of the rich getting richer in San Francisco. And also keep in mind real quick that over the last few years under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, the Niners have made a lot of moves going into the deadline. Jordan Willis, Charles Omenihu, Christian McCaffrey, Randy Gregory a couple of weeks ago. The list goes on and on and on. So I first want to start off team by team here with the Denver Broncos. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a bad football team. Russell Wilson doesn't look all that good, even though he's playing a little bit better than last year. They invested a lot of money into head coach and Sean Payton. It has not yielded a lot of results this year. They look to be one of the worst teams in the league, and they have a bunch of players who could be available going into the deadline, and a couple of players of interest for San Francisco. If you think the Niners need to add depth at wide receiver, how about 2 options here? Jeudy the speedster, Courtland Sutton getting a little bit older, but more of that all-around wide receiver. If you want to fortify some depth at safety, which I don't think the Niners need to do, Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, they're also available. The apple of the Niners' eye might be Garrett Bolles, who primarily plays left tackle. If you switch him over to right tackle, I think he makes this offensive line a lot better. Last year in the playoffs, I think San Francisco got dominated in the trenches by 2 good defenses in Philadelphia and Dallas. And this year, offensive line has been an issue. It was in their first loss of the season against the Cleveland Browns. Garrett Bolles is a really good player. But the dream target, who I've been salivating over, over the last few weeks, is Patrick Surtain. Patrick Surtain is the dream target for the Niners, not just because of how he impacts this team this year, but he can be a building block and a foundational piece for your organization moving forward as well. One of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, and he would form a nasty cornerback duo alongside Mooney Ward. Surtain's Pro Football Focus numbers this year, very solid. Overall grade of 70.5, run defense grade of 80.6, pass rush grade of 75.2, although you really want him on that island on the back end. Coverage grade of 66.1, that's not great, but I think that's also a byproduct of the Broncos not really being able to pressure the quarterback. He's allowed a passer rating of 87.7 when targeted. That's my number 1 trade target for the Niners, because I think when you project forward, that's a player who could be tremendous for this defense. Still young, pretty affordable. You sign him to a contract extension, he's going to be really good for a really long time at a very important position. Another depth wide receiver could be Hunter Renfrow. He has barely played this year and is no longer a factor for that Las Vegas Raiders offense. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo is injured. Devontae Adams pouted out of the locker room. He's complaining about his role with Las Vegas. Hunter Renfrow, as a slot shifty wide receiver in this offense, I'm pretty intrigued by the idea. Only 6 catches this year, 59 yards. Making a little bit of money, I believe, in the neighborhood of about $13 million per year. But because he's not playing at all, could San Francisco get him for cheap? And if that's the case, I'd look into the player for sure. Before we continue to move forward with our trade targets going into the deadline, I want to say thank you to the Niner gang. Thank you to the Niner Empire, and thank you to the faithful. We surpassed 96,000 subscribers, and we're on that road to getting that plaque from YouTube, which is the cream of the crop for all content creators and broadcasters out there. If you want daily Niners content, informative shows to make you a smarter Niner fan and smarter football fan, hit that subscribe button down below. That's our mission, to provide you with the best content here on YouTube. Another team that could sell, Minnesota Vikings. And a couple of trade targets here that I like. Danielle Hunter, defensive end for the Vikings. More on him in a moment. KJ Osborne, depth wide receiver. And then Jordan Hicks at linebacker. San Francisco's set at linebacker with Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. Oren Burks has been playing pretty well. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles had some moments against the Cleveland Browns. And I like the rookies too, and D. Winters and Jalen Graham too, as developmental pieces. The player who might be attractive to Niner fans out there is Danielle Hunter. He didn't come to a contract extension with Minnesota. They restructured his contract this offseason to give him some more money. This is a player who immediately upgrades your defense. He is on the wrong side of 30, but 8 sacks this year. He's looking to secure the bag, and because of that, he's motivated, and because of that, he's playing well. With that, we tee up this poll question: which position do the Niners need to trade for? Is it a position like offensive line? Is it cornerback? Is it defensive line? You let me know in the chat. I'm looking at our live poll right now. 55% saying offensive line, 37% cornerback, 9% defensive line. Kind of gives you a peek as to what Niner fans are thinking. Before we continue to move forward on today's program, Prize Picks, the only app that you should be using if you want to play daily fantasy sports. It's easy and exciting daily fantasy, and we have a great deal for you. Up to a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. You pick 2+ players and you choose more or less on their projected stat lines. You have an opportunity to win 25 times your money, like myself and producer Chip, and it makes game days a lot more fun. Here are producer Chip's picks for this week. We're putting the microscope right on Chip to see if he can sink or swim. And I got to be honest, I like his picks for Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. TJ Hawkinson, overrated, less than 48.5 receiving yards. Kirk Cousins, overrated, less than 232.5 passing yards. And Brock Purdy, I think that Brock Purdy gets back on track here. Purdy, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. So you can get your picks in at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Code CLNS for up to a $100 deposit match. We're putting that link in the comment section. We're putting that link in the description of this video. And if you like those picks from producer Chip, I want you to type Chip down below in the comment section. Now we venture to the desert. 2 players who I want to hone in on here as Niners trade targets. Budda Baker, more of a luxury selection. Zach Ertz, more of the realistic trade option. I've always been interested in the idea of 2 tight end sets, more 12 personnel, and San Francisco having a legitimate backup tight end behind George Kittle. Because when you put 2 tight ends like that on the field, and Zach Ertz as well as Kittle, you have 1 pass blocking option in Kittle and then a pass catching option in Zach Ertz. It diversifies your offense to a certain degree. 2 players here for the Cardinals who have been competitive but could be sellers. Washington now. 1 player we talked about earlier this week, Chase Young. Stellar defensive end. And then on the other side of that defensive line, Montez Sweat. Going into this offseason for the Commanders, a big decision awaits for that front office under new ownership here. And I think that one of these 2 players gets an extension and the other might get franchise tag, or maybe one gets dealt going into the deadline. Chase Young has been injured a lot in his career, has a lot of name value, of course, though, and this year coming off of an injury, 2 injury-plagued seasons, in fact, coming off that torn ACL a couple of years ago that caused him to miss a lot of 2021 as well as 2022. He's been really good. You take a gander at the top quarterback pressure leaders in the NFL. Great talent here with Max Crosby leading the way with 38 pressures. Micah Parsons has 37. Aiden Hutchinson has notched 36 through 6 weeks. Bryce Huff with 34. And there you see Chase Young, 31 quarterback pressures. Could he reunite with Nick Bosa to form one of the most feared 1-2 punches at defensive end in the National Football League. We know the Chicago Bears have been an awful football team since they beat the Niners in Week 1 last year in that monsoon at Soldier Field. They have not won a lot of football games, and this year, that story and that trend has continued. So because of that, they're definitely going to be sellers in my estimation. Get value back for some players that you might not re-sign or that helps you push along that rebuilding process. Darnell Mooney, a really good backup type of wide receiver, better suited as a 2 or 3. Lot of buzz about Jaylon Johnson, the cornerback, being a Niners trade target. And according to reports out there that I've seen from multiple outlets on the internet, on Twitter, San Francisco reportedly has checked in on Bears cornerback Jaylon Johnson, who is one of their best players on the entire roster for Chicago and one of the best defensive players on that team as well. His Pro Football Focus grades this year actually better than Patrick Surtain. Overall grade of 79, coverage grade of 80.8. He's allowed a passer rating of 64.6, 125 coverage snaps, and 1 pass breakup. These numbers are elite, and some of the same things that I said about Surtain being a building block and a young player. Jaylon Johnson has the pedigree. Surtain, first-round pick. Johnson, a second-round pick. Both are young corners who you're probably going to have to sign to a contract extension. Both have good size, good instincts, good length, and I like their coverage abilities. You can put them out on an island. And then lastly, whether it's Patrick Surtain or it's Jaylon Johnson, you put that player next to Mooney Ward and you put Deommodore Lenoir in the slot, who's been playing really good ball now for about the last season and a half. That's a hell of a secondary right there with what you have at that safety position already. Another dream target for San Francisco. It is Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers, the defensive end edge rusher, final year of his deal, looking to secure the bag. And a similar story with a lot of the players who we're talking about on today's show. He wants a contract extension. He's on a rebuilding and bad football team that has grown weary of having to give him long-term money because they're not sure if it makes sense to give a bag to a player like this. Brian Burns, once again, putting together another really good season here in 2023. 20 tackles, 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 0 fumbles recovered. The thing with Brian Burns here, he's become maybe the best Panthers trade target because Jeremy Chin, the safety nickel corner hybrid, expected to be out for about the next 6 weeks because of a quad injury, and I don't think San Francisco would acquire a player who's on the shelf for that long. A weapon that the Niners could bring in who could help you with kick returns, who could help you have a wide receiver, running back type of Deebo Samuel weapon, Cordero Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons. He's only played like 16 offensive snaps this year because the bulk of those carries are going to rookie phenom Bijan Robinson. And then another player that I think is realistic is Jalen Mills. Throughout his career with Philadelphia, now with New England, he's played a lot of safety, he's played a lot of corner, and Jalen Mills is a smart, heady football player that the Eagles valued, and then Bill Belichick valued. They like his defensive mind. They like how he's kind of positionless to a certain degree. He could play anywhere on this team, and he has championship pedigree. If you're still hanging out with us on today's show, Real One Roll Call. Let me know if you're a real one by typing real one down in the chat. If you haven't subscribed, you ain't alive. And make sure you hit that sub button for daily content on San Francisco.